Greetings, this is Jaz of Jaz Reviews, back from the shadows to deliver unto thee my review for Dishonored 2. Developed by Arcane Studios, published by Bethesda.
Stopping and questioning all foreigners and new workers on the streets of Karnaca.
Taking place in the same twisted world of the first game, yet deviating from the rat-infested nightmare of Dunwall to the slightly more colourful palette of Karnaca some 15 years later. The premise, however, is one that is still familiar. Choose to play as either Corvo Attano, Dishonored 1's royal protector, or Emily Caldwin, the Empress herself, all grown up from the previous game and schooled in the arts of subterfuge by her father, Corvo. Whatever your choice, the alternative character you didn't choose is in need of rescue. You'll find your name outlawed once again, as a result of an oppressive coup that has ripped through the establishment in a rather abrupt power play, tying the Empress's regime to a conspiracy that narratively underpins a healthy portion of the game, legitimized through the mysterious Crown Killer murders.
A monster the papers are calling the Crown Killer has been picking off my enemies and dressing it up like my father and I are responsible.
The most divergent mechanical difference from the first game rests with a new array of supernatural abilities. Corvo's power set remains essentially the same, enabling him to blink up and down and all over the place whilst bending time, throwing tornadoes, possessing life forms, looking through walls, and summoning devouring swarms. On the other hand, Emily's new powers are a very welcome addition. Far Reach replaces Corvo's blink ability, a more physical grabbing animation as opposed to teleportation, in addition to more combat-based practicality. Mesmerize functions by the means of distraction, whilst the powerful Domino ability allows for multiple linking of targets, tying their fates to simultaneous death if just one target is killed, or a nice deep sleep for instance if the crossbow's sleep dart is utilized instead. Shadow Walk allows Emily to assume a dark, stealthier form to take down enemies, whilst Doppelganger, a very useful power, summons independent clones of Emily to fight and distract enemies while you may slip away. Each power retains the capacity to be upgraded. So for example, an upgrade may allow for more doppelgangers per use. Or as with Corvo's updated possession, it can be upgraded to extend its capability to temporarily possess dead bodies in the process of penetrating enemy lines. In doing so, all of these powers can be wonderfully used in conjunction with one and another, establishing endless stealth and combat methodologies for the player to creatively explore and make for truly unique experiences. The Dishonored 2 experience is one that, for the most part, will feel one and the same with the first, in its linear yet fantastically intricate, tactic-inciting style of level design, with a home hub serving as a place to wander in between each of Dishonored 2's 9 levels. Fulfilling the role of the first game's pub, the dreadful whale ship serves as a means of talking with your allies, reading notes, and completing very tiny mini-ship maintenance objectives. Collectibles or souvenirs found throughout the game you will also find upon the mantle in your personal cabin. Nevertheless, it must be nice for Corvo or Emily to have time to themselves, all alone in their rooms, with not much else to do in between their escapades. Because the new hub is a dreadful bore in itself, host to limited dialogue and not much else. A form of black market shop to purchase upgrades and equipment might have given this ship a more practical purpose in spite of narrative constraints. A handful of new additions purchased through Dishonored's sparingly placed black market vendors open up the game to more non-lethal actions. Howling crossbow bolts blind and deafen enemies. Stinging bolts cause enemies to ignore their surroundings and flee in agonizing pain. And in your travels, be sure to keep an eye out for blueprints for new mechanisms and upgrades. Dishonored is a franchise fundamentally concerned with choice, be it tactical or moral. It's entirely possible to complete this title without killing one person, including the main storyline targets which can be dispatched in more inventive non-lethal ways. I won't spoil any of these remedies on screen for you, but I do think the second game's scripted assassination methods or non-lethal alternatives are not quite as imaginative as in the first game. Ultimately, however, based upon the level of chaos your character inflicts through such choices, and of course the quantity of enemies or NPCs killed through the game, you'll find the game's ending to follow suit. Yet the targets that need to be neutralized or slain hold far less emotional weight this time around. Now that's not to say the world doesn't offer a rather extensive system of backstory and lore to support these characters, but they just don't prove to be as memorable compared to Dishonored 1's. But when we're on the subject, I think the premise of Dishonored 2 itself is somewhat underwhelming, somewhat being the operative word here. Voice acting I received as being a little strained, although I think it is the writing itself that has given our assassins some peculiar sentence deliveries. Yet, figuratively, it's as if Arkane's writers picked up from storage the storyboard from the first game and made a few half-assed tweaks in order to introduce new villains in focus of consolidating upon past gameplay. The main storyline is materially the same, one that I believe could be pitched from many of you even watching this review. However, those responsible for embellishing the core narrative with backstory and believable NPC discourse deserve much praise. Environmentally speaking, Karnaca certainly feels lived in, albeit half deserted, yet far more populated than Dishonored 1's Dunwall. From the balconies and rooftops of above, you may realize that Karnaca is no Dunwall in its depiction of Victorian London, but one more identifiably Mediterranean. The game's architecture and interiors are a touch more colourful, tantalizing, and inviting upon a first impression. However, a long stream of blood, grime, and the demonic, all bathed in unapologetic squalor, can be traced from Corvo, or Emily's arrival at the dock, up until the very end of your playthrough. What comes to mind? Intelligently and very purposefully placed piranhas, eerily gruesome crime scenes, weathered brickwork and graffiti-bearing alleyways, and last but not least, the heinous bloodfly nests that take up residence in many of Karnaca's abominable quarantined buildings. Adding substance to this place of impending doom are the massively supporting works of literature, providing context and really the majority of the game's story, that collectively make this world feel very real, which is something Dishonored does extraordinarily well. Completionists will also appreciate a number of paintings to be collected.
Too grieved to notice that she'd slipped the ring from her dead sister's finger.
Amplifying this sense of atmosphere are the conversations between NPCs and their inner, most intimate deep thoughts, made accessible through the Pulsing Heart narrative aid that is again given voice through Emily's late mother, Empress Jessamine Caldwin. The Heart reveals much in the way of how Dishonored's writing has succeeded to obscure the sense of right or wrong in this universe.
What?
The Heart is an essential tool to be employed in the challenging prospect of locating a level's well-planted runes and bone charms. Runes fuel the notion of acquiring and upgrading your mystical powers, whilst bone charms can be equipped for a number of passive perks and the like. So how about graphics? Dishonored 2 is environmentally supreme, and it can look good, it really can, but something is always missing graphically. Any system you play on will run into shading, anti-aliasing issues, jagged or low-res textures, and a fair amount of lag spikes. The big performance issues associated with release day were rightly addressed by a number of reviewers that drew upon how badly optimized this game was. Now, of course, the latest patches are in and have gone a long way to address some of the bugs I previously encountered, but it's still a long way off what I would call optimized. As a stealth game, Dishonored 2 is one of the most mechanically sound out there. As previously mentioned, level design is central to allowing for numerous creative playstyles, be it rat tunnels, rooftops, and interwinding streets that provide for extremely thoughtful, handcrafted networks of bottlenecks and open spaces, all of which work together to render challenge and intelligent strategy. A couple of missions are particularly unique. The Clockwork Mansion level and all of its interior design is a marvel to see unfold and transition into forms of puzzles that I don't ever recall being done quite like this. Enemies are more perceptive too, with sophisticated peripheral and long-sighted vision. Simply put, stealth is brilliant. It is a trial and error process, and so the new addition of quick saving and loading is much appreciated. But for those that enjoy the challenge of a melee, all-out combat is dangerous, and the game will hold no punches should you find yourself in that predicament. All in all, Dishonored 2 has built upon what made the first game such a success. Its design can be traced back to the lineage of the Thief series, but this is a game now that feels entirely distinct. If you've played the first game, you'll find the formula not too dissimilar and thoroughly enjoyable to those that are on board for what has been somewhat of a niched, solid stealth game franchise, with intelligently crafted environment and backstory. I just would have hoped the sequel here was more ambitious, with more gameplay innovation, and of course, if it possessed something other than the inexcusably weak and lazy overarching main narrative that embodies the entire game. I issue Dishonored 2 8 out of 10. This has been Jaz of Jaz Reviews, with my review for Dishonored 2. If you like the review, subscribe, stay tuned, follow my Twitter and all that crap you're usually accustomed to hearing. But please do. More videos are indeed on the way, but until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.